Hello, everyone. Welcome to LCDQ Strong 2, the Digital Summit. While we are very sad not to be in person with you this year, we are very happy to be gathering from afar. I'm Lindsay Shook, Editorial Director of California Home and Design, and I'm very thankful to be here with two of California's most iconic design figures, architect and author Paul McLean of McLean Design, and top interior designer Annette English. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
I have to say collaborators, which we'll get into in a bit.
Yes.
And friends.
And friends.
Yeah.
And friends.
Most important. I think we can all agree that in today's world, the home has become the most important staple of our lives. So during this discussion, we'll explore how contemporary living has come to this place that it's in now and what it might look like in the future. So I'd like to start with a question for both of you. Paul, we can start with you if you'd like.
Ladies first.
Okay, Annette, to you first. What is your definition of today's contemporary home in California? Because, for me, being an editor that sees so many different styles in California, it's hard to totally pin down, even though there is kind of a look we get, right? So I'm just curious what you think today's contemporary home is in California.
So for me, today's contemporary home in Southern California is sort of these beautiful monolithic spaces that are dominated with clean lines, lots of glass doors, windows, walls that really blur the indoors and the outdoors, and that sort of create this expansive view for the eye to sort of see the nature beyond. And I think that they're lovely, and I think it's tough to actually build a really beautiful modern home because you can't have sort of like the crown moldings and things like that to sort of like hide the details. But I think they create a sense of well-being. There's a lot of spatial drama, especially in Paul's homes. But it really is about bringing the indoors out, the use of sort of consistent materials. So once again, you use some similar materials on the inside and the outside, so your eye is just traveling to the views and beyond.
Right. What about you, Paul?
I think Annette said it perfectly. I hardly have anything to add. I completely agree. I've always been in love with California contemporary design since I was a kid, and that's what drove me to come here in the first place. And I feel like it's for me, it's that balance between nature and view and sight. And there's a great openness in California to exploring ideas. And it goes back like 100 years. I mean, I think it goes all the way back to the beginning of the film industry. Like people would create these fantasy films and then seem to come home to fantasy design. And we can see that even all over places like Hancock Park, all these different types of homes and styles. But this idea of modern living really took hold here in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And, there was a thing about health behind it, the idea that sunlight and access to the outdoors would give you benefits in terms of your health. And I think that's something that carries through to today, especially in the times we're living, that we are so fortunate to be able to design these homes that have this great connection to outdoors. And we try really hard to make that boundary go away as much as possible.
You do a very good job of it.
Thank you.
You have an extensive, your work is prolific throughout Southern California. However, each of your projects to me is very unique. How do you and the team achieve this balance?
The funny thing is I really don't think about that. And I think that's part of it. I start by looking at site and listening to our clients and their programs. And I really want, when we talk to our clients, I want them to feel like it's their home. And I don't worry about style because I think that comes innately through the process. And at least for me, there is, I never think of having a style, but then, you look at all the pictures and like, oh yeah, I guess we do. It's like there's similarities. But, there's a lot of things you find on site that start, that you see first as a blank piece of paper, but there's so many constraints. And especially in suburban Los Angeles, there's sites can be limited in size, but there's, for example, the view is in one direction, the access is another direction, and maybe things that you need to edit out. We call it spatial editing. So you might look at, maybe there's a busy road or an ugly roof down below. So we'll think, okay, well, what if we put a body of water there to stop people from moving all the way forward and seeing that road? What if we use the sound of water to mask a busy street, or use vegetation to screen a power pole? So there's this idea of spatial editing, and that comes from sight and direct response to sight. And then there's like the client themselves, like what is it they dreaming about? What is exciting for them? And you put that whole puzzle together, and then, out it comes, I guess, on the other side.
So it's almost the limitations, that kind of.
Yeah. I think of them as opportunities. They're not really limitations. They're there was a house I did recently, and it came together so fast, and it was because those constraints were so obvious. Right now I'm working on a house in Florida on this beautiful lake, and there's so much room, and it's like, gosh, where do I put everything? It's like totally different to my usual cliffside, like hanging on by your fingernails on the cliff and get the house to work. So the constraints can really be helpful. They're an opportunity to work with.
Are there many, since you've worked around the globe, really, how would you define the constraints in California versus other places you've worked?
There are, it's interesting because our clients that we have that aren't here are looking for a California house. That's why they hire us. Otherwise, they would get someone local to do it. So our biggest challenge is the other way around, in a way. It's like we want to respect local culture and local traditions, but we have to bring that in a way that reflects the type of work that we do here. So I think California, obviously, we have seismic codes, which for me are always like the bane of my existence. That and the California Energy Code, because the California Energy Code wishes everything was made of brick or concrete and not glass. And you'll have to look at the pictures to see that's not really where we go. Those are uniquely Californian issues. But, most places we work have similar constraints. Like in Florida, they have hurricanes versus you have to deal with the same type of forces. They're just coming at you rather than from under you. And obviously in California, prices are very high. It's a very expensive real estate market, but in some ways that can work to our advantage because people invest so much in the property that they're willing to, invest in a house that merits being on that property.
True. Annette, you have an extensive interior design career in California. What has been the biggest shift in what clients want from a home that you've seen?
I spent 10 years in San Francisco where I actually started my career, and I've been in LA for 20. So I have seen some.
You can't possibly be. You must have been 5 when you started.
I'm 33. So I have seen a lot of changes. And I think specifically living in Southern California, people really want to take advantage of the climate and having this sort of blurred vision between sort of like the indoors and the outdoors. And we live in such a frenetic world these days that I think people are looking for a sanctuary. They're looking for homes that are state of the art, whether they're, having home theaters or spas or salons. So I think, home just continues, like we're raising the bar and our clients are raising the bar. And, so it's just like this continual organic sort of stepping up of sort of like meeting like clients' needs and demands with technology. Technology has really sort of aided us in what we can do and provide, and with clients wanting like state-of-the-art homes, they want to be able to like have a smart home where they can manipulate their home with a push of a button from their iPhone and work their home from afar, whether that's turning on the music or changing the lighting or opening window treatments or setting the mood or the tone. And we have one client right now actually who's using this state-of-the-art lighting system which actually simulates the lighting outside. So if it's sunny outside, it brings the same type of lighting inside, which is all about creating a sense of wellness.
Wow.
So I think it's come a long way from where it was 20 years ago, and technology is part of that.
I think my life would be much healthier if I could just push a button and my home be clean all the time, but.
I know, me too.
We haven't figured that one out yet.
That'll be next.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to know, Paul, because you do seem to me quite modest about your work. It's just how do you define your style, and how do you think it's made an imprint on the Southern California aesthetic?
Well, you know, I know I'm not trying to be modest, but I mean, there's so many spectacular architects that have, you know, blazed a pathway in Southern California. It's an inspiration around the world, and that was where my inspiration came from. You know, that's what got me here in the first place. Growing up in rainy Dublin and looking at pictures of houses like Albert Frey's house in Palm Springs, or the Richard Neutra house out there, or the Lovell house. You know, it's like. That's just such an inspiration for me. So my style, I think, is derivative from that. I think what's great for me to be alive and practicing now versus for a lot of those architects was that they were the true trailblazers, you know, not us. And but they didn't really have the technology to do it right. And I mean, you go to some of these homes and you've seen them in magazines and books since you were a kid, and they're fantastic and it's exciting to get there. And they're like, that's not really aluminum, that's wood painted to look like aluminum.
Right. I agree.
Glass is probably an eighth of
black material, advancement was
or like the glass is an eighth of an inch thick, and you're either freezing or boiling inside there. So I think that what we've been able to do is take a lot of those ideas and build on them and create homes that work better for people today. And I think that was probably, for me, just if I can waffle on a bit more, the thing about contemporary design was that there's some brilliant people that started the ideas, and then we had the post-World War, you know, period where a lot happened very quickly, and a lot of things that were very cheap happened, and people have, you know, in many countries found like modernism to be a turnoff, you know, because it was just like cheap materials thrown together and no ornamentation, you know, and so on. But I feel now we've kind of passed, improved, and, you know, now we're building much better homes. And people, that's why modernism is so popular again now, because the true things that it represents, like connection to nature, health and well-being, indoor, outdoor living, all of those things, you can really achieve them today. And then people respond to that. There was a great story years ago. I designed a house in southern Germany. I nearly got fired 3 times because I kept designing contextual houses in the village. And then my client says, if you don't design a California house for me soon, I'll get someone else. So I'm like, fine. But his wife was from Chile, and she'd lived in traditional, you know, Spanish homes in Chile her whole life. And when she moved into me, she said, you know, I don't think I'll be able to live here. I feel like I'm in a fishbowl. Everything is open. You know, I can see for miles in every direction. I don't feel homey at all. 3 months later, I visited her, and she said I could never go back. And we sat there in the kitchen. It was a February morning. There was 2 feet of snow outside. We watched hawks like dive bombing to pick up their food in the fields, and you're just like, wow, this is spectacular, you know. So I think once you go down this path, it's really hard to go back to living in a traditional home.
Agreed. I think it's transformative. I'd love to get into a little bit more about your dynamic between the two of you. And I understand that you are working on a project together, and I wondered if you could share how that process has been so successful for you.
Well, I think probably I'll start, you know, because Annette is so great, and that's the project behind her, that she's in the garden right now. But I think, yeah, like, she's a great team. She's a brilliant designer, and we've just so immensely enjoyed working with her. And, you know, they come to us with new and creative ideas, and it's a joy to sit there and look at all the options. And right now, it's a real joy to visit the site and see them become real. Because when was it, 2 years ago when we did that whole presentation? You know, I've forgotten some of the things, you know, that you came up with, and then it's like, wow, that looks so cool, and there it is, you know. So that's
lifetime of a home, huh? The project.
Yeah.
And what about you, Annette? What have you learned from Paul and his team?
You know, I would say that, first of all, I really admire Paul's work. And beyond admiring his work, I really think he's a wonderful person. And he's down to earth, he's fun, and he's really humble. So we've been
Which can
on
be
this
rare in
journey.
architects.
Huh?
Which can be very rare with architects.
It can be really rare with architects, but I also think, like, I'm from Australia, Paul's from Ireland, and I don't know if it's that we're foreigners, but I feel like we have some similar values here and there. But so we've been working on this project, collaborating on this project for 2 years, and I've known Paul for quite a few more years than that. And I think the success in part is that neither team has any ego.
Yeah.
And so our team is able to go to Paul and say, hey, how about this idea? Would you be willing to incorporate this into your idea, into the house? And they're like very, very open, and vice versa. So there's this great sort of like team play without any ego. And I think when that happens, it's really to the benefit of the project. And when you're committed and passionate about creating something extraordinary, and you leave the ego at the door and you play together as a team, I think you really sort of can elevate the end result. And I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, I
that
think
project.
couldn't agree more, but I think it is important that team building. I mean, what would be the point of bringing Annette and her talented team on board if you weren't willing to step back and let them, explore? There's no point otherwise, right? If we're just going to dictate to you what to do, or vice versa. So, but we always feel, I mean, I feel like as an architect, your job is like, there's a design, and that you have to try and communicate to people, like, what is the intention behind the design? But it's a group project. It's not like my design, it's everyone's design. And I try and be the person who kind of keeps steering it in the right direction, in the sense, rather than dictating what has to happen, because I feel like everyone's going to contribute their best if they feel that their ideas have been listened to. But you also have to make sure that it keeps going in the right direction, because, obviously, if it was, everyone just threw any idea they want in there, it might just end up being a bit of a mess, right? But mostly, there's so much talent out there, and it's not just like on the design side, and the construction side as well. And you have to not forget that these people that we build these houses with, that's what they do for a living, right?
Yeah. And they're the best of the best.
They are. So we would be, incredibly silly not to take advantage of that for all of our sakes.
And they take on so much liability. I've always feel
yes.
the end of this, of the business is so underappreciated, because it's the biggest part.
I know they get none of the credit,
I want to touch quickly about, the story you were talking about with Germany, and how the client felt, overwhelmed by glass, really, right? And the access of looking in. And the majority of your projects feature a lot of glass, but, you're working with huge windows. You're working with, some of the world's most elite and private people. So I'm really curious, aside from landscaping, if there are tricks you can share of how you create intimacy while still giving this, huge transparency.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a client who's a well-known actress, and we struggled with that. The point is, she wanted the view, but the view went back to her too. So how do you resolve that problem? And we have another a well-known singer that we have a pool on the roof, and it's like the helicopters are buzzing around, and she never can use the pool. So we've been coming up with solutions to that, which really involve planting vines and planting trellises in that particular case. But I think these homes, a lot of our homes are view homes, and obviously people buy those sites because they want the view. So we try and make sure that in the foreground that we take care through that spatial editing process of immediate privacy concerns. There's only so much we can do about people further away. One of my clients we did recently has a beautiful bathroom which overlooks a canyon in Los Angeles, and he showers in there, and the other people are way across the canyon. His point is like, well, if they really want to make that much of an effort to see me showering like for 5 minutes a day, I guess have at it, right? But I think in terms of intimacy, that is a really great point. And, I think that for us, a lot of the beauty of our homes is not the house itself, but the environment around them. So we're trying to bring that environment in. So it's, in some ways, it's a little bit like camping on a big scale, right? Luxury camping, because, you're aware of the outdoors the entire time that you're there. But we also try to create more intimate spaces I think it's very important that when you have these big open environments, that you also create places where people can feel that they can nest a little better. So my contrast, excuse me, a vaulted, beautiful, great room with a quiet library space with a fireplace, and where you can get away from that view. And also, I think, it's important that you don't just have those more private and more intimate spaces be bedrooms. Like you want to create a secondary public level to the house where people can congregate together. And, the last thing we want is everyone dispersing to the bedrooms if we can manage that, with our budget.
I think a lot of the intimacy and softness of contemporary homes comes from the actual interior design part of it.
It does, yeah. Annette.
Screens, the furnitures, and I think that's what Annette brings to the conversation, is how do you really balance and create more softness and intimacy in these homes?
It's a really great point. When I started out many years ago doing these very elaborate homes, that was a question I thought, how am I going to do that? And I've learned that there's many ways to create intimacy where, maybe we put wood on the ceilings. I think a lot of it is about volume, and maybe you've got these very, very tall ceilings, but you'll have like a lighting pendant that sort of like cascades down, and then you'll have a floor lamp that like sort of meets in between. And so there's never like this huge gap or volume between the floor and the ceiling. Even if it is structurally, it's like we're installing things that bring it together, that make it feel homey.
A larger, like the scale of a light
it's all about scale, and it's all about the materials that can create the warmth. And so there's kind of like lots of little, they're not even tricks, but just things that you learn along the way that create the intimacy. Because I swear, every client who builds a contemporary home, they still want an intimate sanctuary to come home to. They don't want a cold box.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard a few big designers say comfort is the new luxury.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this leads me to one of my last questions, because we've been speaking about intimate areas in the home, and, I can personally attest to having a husband that's now fully at home and a 5-year-old that I'm thankful to be in a non-open floor plan home right now. So I'm curious on what both of you think the future floor plan looks like. Do we still continue to have this grand openness? Do we just create more different, more smaller spaces outside of the main living areas? What does it look like as a result of the pandemic?
Can I go?
Yeah.
Yep.
For me, what I see, I think we will have a continuation of these open floor plans because people want to be together, and they like being close to their children. If their children are doing homework or whatnot, everyone wants to be together in the home. And as I touched on before, we live in like such a frenetic world, not just in Los Angeles, but everything that's going on in the world these days, that home really has become a place of, we want to find well-being. We want to be wrapped up, in a cocoon. And so I think that with people working from home more, they're going to be tricking out their gyms if they haven't already. They're going to be really focusing on what their home offices look like and just making everything sort of at their fingertips. And I think that post-COVID, it'll be really interesting to see where we go and what sticks from this new norm that we have and how we live. But I think the bar will be raised for Paul and myself and other interior designers and architects to like, how do we create like a new level of home for people to just feel well and love being there, where they can work from and
entertain each other. And I think you mentioned it perfectly, that it needs to have just, everything be at the tip of your fingers.
Yeah, and then when you put that key in the door at the end of the day, you come home, you just feel like your house is going to wrap its arms around you. And we all want that. We all want our sanctuary. So
how about you, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, sanctuary is a great word. I think that's not going to go away. I think maybe we'll have to be a bit more creative, and that issue of public space is really important. I had a conversation yesterday with a client on site, and he has a 2-year-old, and he's busy creating a playroom in the basement, where all the toys can be and whatever. And I'm just saying to him, we all love these more open floor plans, because it really gives you the sense of space and volume that lets you kind of lifts you up a little bit and gives you that opportunity for connection to everybody else. But, it's just not going to work for people. Hopefully we will all be, going back to normal sometime next year. But I think a lot of people have discovered that they can do more work at home, but it's not necessarily, as you know yourself, Lindsay, if your husband and your kids are there trying to get something done, it's a challenge. So we're going to have to create ways because again, I feel really strongly about that idea that we don't want to turn all our bedrooms into, temporary offices or Zoom school, So thinking of ways that we can allow multiple people to work in the home, as opposed to the old program would be people would come in and say, okay, well, I want, X number of bedrooms and a living room and meeting room and one office, and that was as much thought that was given. But now we're trying to have people think about, okay, well, how many people are going to work in this office? And are they going to be able to work together or separately? Will you maybe have an employee come to the house because that might work?
Or client for a meeting, right?
Yeah, for a meeting, or especially if we're thinking post-COVID, And then what about business people that you don't necessarily want them to see your whole house, or like you said earlier, you have to magically clean the house, like a way that you can just do that without losing your privacy as well. So a little more complicated and a little more interesting, I think, approach.
I definitely envision more bars being requested for homes in the future.
There's definitely more bars.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to end with one question to both of you, and either one can start. I think, being that both of your careers are very extensive, that you do, I think, in some sense, hope to leave an impact for future designers and architects. And I'd love to hear from both of you what you hope your work will leave for those who follow.
You go,
Paul.
Well, funnily enough, yesterday I was doing a lecture with University of Pennsylvania architecture students. So that it's a great question, Lindsay, coming off all their interesting and complicated questions about how you start a business. And I felt like I was having to be almost like a counselor. It's a great industry to be in. I mean, to me, for them, I said, just follow your passion. Architecture and interior design is such a broad field. I have a friend in Philadelphia, and she just programs, for corporations, so that's her job, is to actually talk to everybody and figure out how this new building is going to work. And then she hands it off to an architecture firm that designs it. So it's a very broad field. For the students, I think I try to tell them, be optimistic. I mean, the main thing is if you love what you do, you'll be successful. And there are lots of ways to measure success. I keep telling my own kids that, it's like success is not based on your bank account. I never got into this thinking about money. It was all about wanting to design. And so I hope that there's optimism in our work, and I hope that people will, over time, will appreciate the optimism and the sense of fun and excitement and an emotional connection to the work. That's what I hope that people will get out of it long term. And I hope that another president said, the arc of justice is very long. But it's going in the right direction. We have bumps along the way, big road bumps sometimes, but hopefully they speak to speak to a better future, a better, more optimistic future, a connection to nature. I hope people get out of that, just their surroundings, to be aware, and that it brings them peace and happiness.
And before you speak, and I'd like to just quickly add, I admire your work because some of the modern specs that I see in homes throughout Southern California, they just maximize the lot and they don't take advantage of the environment. And I think your work does, and I hope that will be something people follow. So thank you for that. And Annette, how about you?
So for me, I sort of carry on the heels of what Paul just said, but I'd like to add that for me, I've really had a lot of joy, and I hope to continue having joy creating beauty and putting beauty out there in the world and really impacting my clients and their families and creating homes for them that they love, they feel safe in, they enjoy bringing their friends over to. And so for me, my goal and my purpose with what I do is bringing joy to others and really just creating beautiful spaces and collaborating with wonderful people that just sort of like elevate, you know, my work and the world. And, you know, I feel really, really privileged to be doing what I'm doing. And I think that for the young people of the future who want to get involved in our field, it's like the sky is the limit, you know, it's like technology is going to continue to expand, and there's just, everybody's always going to want a home, and everybody's always going to want to feel safe and well in their home, and this sense of wellness. So I'm glad that I get to contribute in that way.
Wonderful. I always say my two favorite things are music and design because they're infinite.
Yes.
So much possibility. Well, I'd like to open it up for some questions. If anyone watching has any, you can type it in the chat and I'm happy to repeat them and have them answered. And if not, sorry, someone's trying to call me. And if not, we can end it here. You know, I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for sharing your time and your space and your energy, because I know you're on many Zooms and trying to manage kids and homes and, you know, anything else that's going on in this world. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your contributions to our community, because it's what's made us so impactful around the globe. I do have one question. Someone would like to know if we could speak about sustainable materials and how much, you know, what are the requests you're seeing from clients for sustainability? Paul?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, we're lucky to be in a state that takes sustainability seriously. So we're already at a distinct advantage in that the way the California energy codes are written, much as they can be the bane of our existence. You know, when people talk about LEED, if you just happen to be building a modern home in California to the Title 24 requirements of the state, you're 70% there, right there. You know, so we're very fortunate that way. It is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and the thing about it is, it's not a zero-sum game. You know, it's like the more sustainable the homes are, the better the quality of life in them is. You know, we find that our homes, obviously, we do a lot of large homes, and they consume a lot of energy. And even if we can't get our clients on board, you know, from a sustainability perspective, we can get them on a board from the point of view of like, we can lower your energy bills if we take the following steps. So we haven't really got into materiality. Maybe you can speak to that, Annette, you know, in terms of what people are thinking with COVID and so on. I'm not sure. For me personally, I don't know how much legs that has long term. You know, I mean, probably.
I have a question for you with that. Do you, because I actually don't know this about your work, but do you only work with ground up, or do you work with renovations as well on preservation? You
know what, and I know it's not on here, but my favorite project that we did in the last 10 years is a complete rework of a 1903 four-story mansion in Pacific Heights in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. What was good and bad about that was that this dear old house had survived the 1906 earthquake. She didn't really survive the Army and Navy when the boys came back from the war. They cut it all up into tiny little apartments. And we were able to take that house and we were able to strip it down, sizably retrofit it. We lifted it up in the air. Every time I saw that, I was terrified. I thought, what if an earthquake happens? And we put a whole garage underneath it. We took part of the back of the house off and put like a hot tub on the roof with the most gorgeous view of the city. And I feel like, you know, we took that house and we set her on her way for another 100 years. You know, some architect 100 years from now is going to be looking at the mess we made and trying to fix it. But for now, you know, she's on her way. She's got a new lease of life. It's like a total facelift, and off she goes. So that's one of my favorites.
I asked just because I think we always focus on materials and panels, but I also believe strongly in, and I know it's more of a pain in the tail in terms of permitting and things and building, but to maybe try and preserve structures and just update them so that we do also maintain some character. And it is sustainability at the end of the day, because we're not wasting materials per se. So
yeah, if I could add one more point before I net on that, it's like that's always been something I felt strongly about. I personally am not in love with the idea that you have, say, a 1920s Craftsman cottage and you stick a super contemporary addition on the back. I feel like you should respect the structure and work with what you have and do something that suits it and is in keeping with it and love it for what it is, right?
Right.
And there's always an opportunity to do your nice, cool contemporary house somewhere else, right? So anyway, Annette, sorry.
and so I know are you getting a ton of requests for sustainable materials? And then I think the other point was brought up, antimicrobial finishes and materials. No.
What was the last bit?
Antimicrobial finishes. Are you getting requests for those as well?
No.
I think
No, not as yet, but
right.
definitely sustainable. I mean, we primarily, the majority of our work is ground up construction, also like Paul. Earlier in my career, we were doing a lot of remodels, and clearly in that domain, you get to recycle, repurpose materials, and you're not starting from scratch and building new. But also within this new construction, I mean, we do get a lot of requests from clients to use reclaimed, repurposed materials, or whether it even comes from the furniture that they're using. They have some vintage antiques that they want to continue to use or give a new lease of life with reupholstery, certainly solar panels, reclaimed beams or reclaimed floors. So we can still do really modern projects and maybe have like reclaimed floors, but everything else is like era modern,
Right.
but just give it some sort of like tweak. So I think people do care about that, and climate change is so front and center right now that we all need to be thinking that way, and that we need to be educating our clients on what their options are, because they probably don't know. So I think it's our job to do so.
Yeah, I agree. And then I know no problem. There's a few groups who asked firms to commit to less waste during demos. So I think in the next 5 years our industry will actually be a leading providing leading solutions in this issue, I hope. So
I think so too.
Yeah, I want to end with one more question that I always ask because it doesn't look like we have any more in the chat. I would love to know, I'll start with you, Annette, what you're most thankful for right now.
What I'm most thankful for is family, friends, health, clients, my team, my cat, and the fact that I get to the fact that I get to do what I love, all the time. And COVID has been a difficult time for everybody globally. And I love to travel. It's one of my favorite things for myself and my husband, but it's looking for the small pleasures whilst we're sort of in this new normal for the moment. But I try to find gratitude in the here and the now, and with the people that I'm around every day, and the beauty that I see. So nice. Thankful for this opportunity.
How about you, Paul?
I couldn't have said it better. I mean, everything Annette said, including the cat and the dog, because we have a dog. But I think also on top of all that, because I agree like a million% with what you just said, everything, but I also feel, COVID has been such a disaster for so many people. And for me and, for us, I mean, for all our petty complaints and stuff, I feel like in many ways, so far at least, we've been more inconvenienced, than impacted. And that's for myself, I'm so, thankful for that, but I'm so worried about so many other people whose lives are decimated, whether it's by the disease itself or family members dying or, not having any work or not having enough food. I mean, we don't have to worry about those things, so, there's so much to be thankful for. The world has been very kind to us, even in these difficult times.
Well, I'm very thankful for you both being here. I'm very thankful for this technology because it allows us to come together in our sweatpants, albeit and just unify together. And I think be in a much simpler place as a community to help make the world more beautiful. So thank you again for your time. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to doing it one day in person. And thank you.
We hope so too.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Lindsay. Thank you, Paul.
And I hope we can actually do this in person next May with fingers and
Yes.
toes crossed. So
Fingers crossed.
yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Lovely
Bye.
weekend. Coming home.